Hello my friends, today we will discuss about history of the Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, swept across Europe, Asia, and North Africa in the mid-14th century, killing an estimated 50 million people, about half of Europe's population at the time. For centuries, historians and scientists debated where exactly it began and how it spread with such devastating speed. While written chronicles suggested it might have originated in China, Central Asia, or the Black Sea region, there was no concrete biological proof until recent breakthroughs in ancient DNA analysis. In 2022, a team of researchers studying centuries-old graves in Kyrgyzstan made a remarkable discovery. Archaeologists had previously excavated burial sites near the Tiashan Mountains, dated to the years 1338 to 1339, just a few years before the Black Death hit Europe. Many of the gravestones carried inscriptions noting pestilence as the cause of death, suggesting a major outbreak occurred there long before Europe was affected. Scientists extracted ancient DNA from the teeth of individuals buried in these cemeteries. The teeth, which can trap and preserve bacteria in the pulp for centuries, revealed the presence of Yersinia pestis, the plague bacterium responsible for the Black Death. When this ancient bacterial genome was compared to hundreds of modern and historical plague genomes, researchers found it belonged to the very beginning of the Y. pestis lineage that caused the medieval pandemic. The strain was positioned almost exactly at the point in the bacterium's evolutionary family tree where a massive diversification or Big Bang event occurred. This genetic split produced multiple branches of the plague bacterium, some of which would devastate populations for centuries to come. The evidence strongly pointed to this region of Central Asia, specifically around Lake Issyk-Kul, as the cradle of the Black Death pandemic. Historical trade routes help explain how the disease spread from there. The Issyk-Kul region was a hub on the Silk Road, connecting east and west. Flea-infested rodents, such as marmots in the area, are known natural reservoirs for plague bacteria. Fleas feeding on infected marmots likely transmitted Y. pestis to humans, or to other animals such as camels and horses used in trade caravans. From there, the bacterium traveled west along trade networks, eventually reaching ports on the Black Sea. Genoese merchants fleeing the Mongol siege of Kaffa in 1347 are believed to have carried the plague aboard ships to Mediterranean ports, sparking the wave of death that engulfed Europe. This DNA-based discovery ended a centuries-long historical mystery. Rather than being a purely European or Chinese origin, the Black Death's true beginning was now genetically traced to a specific outbreak in Central Asia, just a few years before it tore through the rest of the Old World. The findings also reinforced the role of global trade in spreading pandemics, showing that the world was interconnected in deadly ways long before the modern era. The reconstruction of the plague's family tree was made possible through a process known as paleogenomics, the study of ancient genetic material preserved in archaeological remains. Scientists first extracted DNA from the pulp cavities inside the teeth of plague victims, as these are sealed environments that can protect microbial DNA for hundreds of years. Once the ancient DNA was extracted, it was sequenced and compared with hundreds of other Yersinia pestis genomes, both modern and historical. By analyzing genetic mutations, scientists could identify where each strain fit within the plague's evolutionary timeline. The Issyk-Kul samples were found right at the root of the four major plague branches that later caused outbreaks across Europe, Asia, and Africa. This branching point, which researchers call the Big Bang of plague evolution, appears to have occurred shortly before the Black Death erupted in the 14th century. This also gave important clues about the reservoirs of the disease. Today, plague still exists in the wild in certain rodent populations, especially marmots, gerbils, and ground squirrels in Central Asia. The DNA evidence suggested that the Black Death's ancestor strain likely originated in a marmot population in the Tiashan region. From there, it seems to have jumped to humans through fleas, either directly from hunting marmots or indirectly via pack animals and livestock. Once humans were infected, the disease could spread rapidly in communities with poor sanitation and high population density. The discovery also changed historians' understanding of the plague's global impact. Rather than a sudden, mysterious arrival in Europe, the pandemic now appears to have been part of a chain reaction beginning in Central Asia, moving along trade routes, and eventually becoming one of the earliest examples of a truly global pandemic. It also fits with other historical evidence, such as Mongol military campaigns and Silk Road commerce, which may have acted as accelerators for the spread. In the centuries after the Black Death, plague didn't disappear, it continued to resurface in devastating waves across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia until the 18th century. The fact that all these later strains are genetic descendants of the Issyk-Kul bacteria underscores how one localized outbreak in the early 1300s reshaped the demographic and social history of much of the world. Step-by-step timeline tracing the path of the Black Death from its newly discovered origin in Central Asia to its catastrophic spread across Europe to 1338 1339 outbreak in Issyk-Kul region. Central Asia archaeological and DNA evidence now confirms that Yersinia pestis was killing people in villages near Lake Issyk-Kul in the Tiashan Mountains. Gravestones from this period bear inscriptions referencing pestilence, matching the plague's genetic fingerprint. The bacteria likely circulated in local marmot populations and jumped to humans via flea bites during hunting or trade. Early 1340s, spread along Silk Road trade route. The Issyk-Kul region sat at a strategic crossroads of the Silk Road, linking China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Caravans carried goods and infected fleas westward. Plague may have traveled inside flea-infested animal hides, grain sacks, or on the backs of camels and horses. 1344 to 1346, arrival in Black Sea port. Historical accounts suggest that Mongol forces besieging the Genoese trading outpost of Kaffa in modern-day Crimea were affected by plague. Whether the disease reached the city naturally through trade or was catapulted via infected corpses during siege warfare remains debated, but genetic evidence ties the strains here to the Issyk-Kul ancestor. 1347, plague enters Europeanos. Merchants fleeing Kaffa boarded ships heading for Constantinople, Sicily, and other Mediterranean ports. Rats and fleas aboard these vessels carried white pestis into densely populated cities, sparking rapid outbreaks. 1347-1348, southern and western Europe engulfed from Sicily. Plague spread through Italy's major cities, including Genoa, Florence, and Venice. Trade ships and overland routes carried it into France and Spain. Mortality rates reached up to 60% in some urban centers. 1348-1349, northern expansion. Plague moved into England, carried by ships into the port of Melcombe Regis, and swept across the British Isles. It also penetrated the Low Countries, Scandinavia, and Germany. 1350-1353, final phase of the first wave. 1350, plague had reached most of mainland Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. In total, the pandemic killed tens of millions, disrupted economies, and altered the social fabric of entire regions. All later plague outbreaks over the next 400 years trace their ancestry back to this 1338 to 1339 Central Asian strain, the Issyk-Kul. Discovery proves the pandemic wasn't a spontaneous European event. It was the deadly conclusion of a chain reaction set off by a single regional outbreak along one of history's busiest trade corridors.